The summer I turned 9, my parents packed me into our old station wagon and drove me to my grandparents' house in the sleepy province of Maple Hollow. It was a place where the air smelled of pine and wildflowers, where the sun seemed to linger longer in the sky, and where every day felt like a small adventure waiting to unfold. The house itself was a sturdy log cabin, its walls weathered by years of wind and rain, with a wide front porch that overlooked a meadow dotted with daisies. A red barn stood off to the side, its doors always open, and a gravel path led to a pond that shimmered like glass under the morning light. That summer became a golden chapter in my childhood, a collection of sunlit smiles I'd carry with me forever. We arrived on a warm June afternoon, the car rattling to a stop in the driveway. I flung the door open and ran toward the porch, where Grandma waited with open arms, her floral dress fluttering in the breeze. "My little sunshine," she called, pulling me into a hug that smelled of fresh bread and lilac. Grandpa was right behind her, his overalls dusted with sawdust, a straw hat tipped back on his head. "Looks like you brought the good weather with you," he said, his voice gravelly but kind as he tousled my hair. The cabin was a haven of warmth and clutter. The living room had a stone fireplace, its mantel lined with trinkets, a carved wooden duck, a brass bell, a faded photo of my mom as a girl. The kitchen table was scarred from years of use, and the windows let in streams of light that danced on the hardwood floor. That first evening, after my parents waved goodbye and drove off, Grandma set a plate of her famous blueberry muffins in front of me, still warm from the oven. "Eat up," she said, pouring me a glass of milk. "We've got a big summer ahead." Grandpa leaned back in his chair, a toothpick between his teeth. "First thing tomorrow we're fixing up the rowboat," he said. "That pond's been calling your name." I grinned, already imagining the water under me, the oars in my hands. That night I fell asleep in the guest room, a small space under the eaves with a slanted ceiling and a window that framed the stars. The quilt on the bed was one Grandma had made, its patches a mix of blues and yellows, and I drifted off to the sound of crickets, the cabin settling around me like a gentle embrace. The next morning, I woke to the smell of pancakes and the clatter of dishes. Grandma was at the stove, flipping golden circles onto a plate, while Grandpa sat at the table, sketching something on a napkin. "Morning, sleepyhead," he said, sliding the napkin toward me. It was a rough drawing of a boat with Maple Hollow Queen written across the side. "That's what we're working on today," he said. After breakfast, we headed to the barn, where the rowboat sat on sawhorses, its wood chipped and faded. Grandpa handed me a piece of sandpaper. "Gotta smooth her out before we paint," he said. I worked beside him, the sandpaper rough against my palms, while he told me about the first time he'd taken the boat out as a boy, how he'd rowed to the middle of the pond and caught a fish so big it nearly tipped him over. By noon the boat was smooth, and we painted it a bright blue, the color of the sky on a clear day. The paint splattered on my hands, and Grandpa laughed, his own fingers streaked with blue. "You're a natural," he said. That afternoon we carried the boat to the pond, its surface rippling in the breeze. Grandpa showed me how to row, his hands guiding mine on the oars, and we glided across the water, the sun warm on my back. Ducks paddled nearby, their quacks echoing, and I spotted a turtle sunning itself on a rock. "This is your kingdom now," Grandpa said, leaning back as I rowed us in a wobbly circle. I felt like a captain, the Maple Hollow Queen, my trusty ship. The next day, Grandma had a mission for us. "The garden needs tending," she said, handing me a small trowel. The garden was a patchwork of vegetables and flowers behind the cabin. Rows of tomatoes, carrots, and beans, with marigolds and sunflowers along the edges. I knelt beside her, digging holes for new seeds while she weeded, her hands quick and sure. "This garden's been here since I married your grandpa," she said, brushing dirt from her gloves. "Every plant's got a story." She told me about the sunflowers she'd planted for my mom's 5th birthday, how they'd grown taller than her, and the carrots Grandpa had once tried to grow but ended up with nothing but greens. I laughed, imagining him grumbling over a pile of carrot tops. As we worked, a woman appeared at the garden gate, a basket over her arm. "Morning, Ruth," she called, her voice bright. She was Mrs. Linden, a neighbor who lived up the hill, her hair a wild tangle of curls, her apron stuffed with herbs. "Brought you some mint," she said, handing Grandma a bundle. She turned to me, her eyes crinkling. "You must be the summer helper. I've got a goat you might like to meet." After lunch, we walked to her farm, a small plot with a rickety fence and a barn smaller than Grandpa's. The goat, a scruffy white creature named Daisy, bleated as we approached, her ears twitching. Mrs. Linden showed me how to feed her a handful of grain, and Daisy nibbled at my fingers, her lips tickling. "She likes you," Mrs. Linden said, and I spent the afternoon chasing Daisy around the yard, her bell jangling as she bounded away. One evening, Grandpa took me to the meadow to catch fireflies. The air was thick with their tiny blinking lights, like stars that had fallen too close to the ground. He showed me how to cup my hands gently around them, their glow pulsing against my palms before I let them go. "Used to do this with your mum," he said, his voice soft. "She'd run around till she was too tired to stand." We sat in the grass, the fireflies drifting upward, and I told him about Daisy, the boat, the garden. He listened, nodding, his straw hat tilted back. "Sounds like a good summer so far," he said. "Plenty more to come." A few days later, we went to the Maple Hollow Festival, a yearly event in the town square. The square was alive with booths and banners, the air filled with the smell of popcorn and grilled corn. Grandma set up a table to sell her knitted scarves, their colors bright against the white cloth, while I wandered with a quarter Grandpa had given me. I tried a game where you knock down cans with a ball, missing every shot but winning a small whistle as a prize. Then I met Sam, a boy my age with a gap-toothed grin, selling lemonade with his dad. "It's the best in town," he said, pouring me a cup. The lemonade was tart and sweet, the best I'd ever had, and Sam told me about the treehouse he'd built in his backyard. "You should come see it," he said, and I promised I would. At the festival there was a pie-eating contest, and Grandpa signed us up. We sat at a long table with a crowd cheering, a blueberry pie in front of each of us. "No hands," the judge said, and we dove in, the filling smearing across my face as I laughed. Grandpa won, his beard stained purple, and I came in second, my stomach aching but my heart full. We watched a tractor pull later, the machines rumbling as they dragged heavy weights, and I cheered for Grandpa's friend Mr. Tate, who took 3rd place. That night, we danced to a fiddler's tune, Grandma twirling me around, her laughter brighter than the string lights above. One afternoon, Grandma decided it was time to bake cookies. The kitchen became a flurry of flour and sugar, the air thick with the smell of vanilla. She let me crack the eggs, my hands sticky as I mixed the dough, and we shaped the cookies into stars and hearts. "These are for the neighbors," she said, but she let me sneak one straight from the oven, the chocolate chips melting on my tongue. We delivered the cookies to Mrs. Linden, who gave us a jar of her homemade jam in return, and to Mr. Tate, who invited us in for a glass of iced tea. His living room was full of old farming tools, and he showed me a scythe he'd used as a young man, its blade still sharp. "Hard work builds character," he said, and I nodded, though I wasn't sure I understood. Another day, Grandpa took me on a hike through the woods behind the cabin, a dense forest of pine and oak that smelled of earth and moss. He carried a walking stick pointing out animal tracks in the dirt, a deer here, a rabbit there. "You've got to be quiet if you want to see them," he whispered, and we crept along, the leaves crunching softly underfoot. At a clearing, we spotted a fox, its red fur bright against the green, slipping through the underbrush. "That's a good omen," Grandpa said, his eyes crinkling. We sat on a fallen log, sharing a thermos of water, and he told me about the time he'd gotten lost in these woods as a boy, only to find his way back by following the stars. "They'll always guide you home," he said, and I looked up, imagining the night sky above us. One morning, Sam came by on his bike, his lemonade stand earnings jingling in his pocket. "Treehouse time," he called, and I followed him to his house, a small place just past Mrs. Linden's farm. The treehouse was in a sturdy maple, its boards nailed together with a rope ladder dangling down. We climbed up, the space cramped but cozy, with a tin roof and a window that looked out over the fields. Sam had a box of comic books stashed there, and we spent the afternoon reading, the pages crinkling as we traded stories about superheroes and secret hideouts. "This is the best spot in Maple Hollow," he said, and I agreed, the treehouse a fortress of our own making. As the summer drew to a close, Grandma organized a picnic by the pond, inviting Mrs. Linden, Mr. Tate, and Sam's family. We spread blankets on the grass, the sun high overhead, and feasted on fried chicken, potato salad, and the cookies we'd baked. Sam and I raced to the water, splashing each other until we were soaked, while the adults laughed from the shore. Grandpa took out his harmonica, playing a jaunty tune, and Grandma sang along, her voice clear and sweet. Mrs. Linden brought Daisy the goat, who nibbled at the grass while I petted her, her bell jangling softly. It was a perfect day, the kind that felt like it could last forever, the laughter and music weaving us all together. My last day in Maple Hollow came too soon. I woke to the smell of Grandma's pancakes, but there was a heaviness in my chest as I packed my bag. At breakfast, Grandpa handed me a small wooden duck he'd carved, its wings painted blue to match the rowboat. "Something to remember us by," he said, his hand warm on my shoulder. Grandma gave me a jar of Mrs. Linden's jam, her hug tighter than usual. "You're always welcome here," she said, her eyes misty. When my parents arrived, I hugged Grandma and Grandpa one last time, my throat tight. Sam rode up on his bike to say goodbye, promising to keep the treehouse ready for next summer. As we drove away, I watched the cabin shrink in the distance, the meadow waving goodbye with its daisies. Maple Hollow had given me a summer of sunlit smiles, rowing on the pond, baking with Grandma, hiking with Grandpa, laughing with new friends. It was a place of simple joys, a chapter I'd revisit in my dreams, a reminder of the magic that lives in the quiet corners of childhood. Years later, I'd return to that cabin, the meadow still blooming, the pond still shimmering. Grandma and Grandpa would be gone, but their voices would linger in the creak of the porch swing, their love in the quilt on my bed. Sam would still be there, older, but with the same gap-toothed grin, and we'd climb the treehouse one more time, the comics still waiting. Maple Hollow would always be my summer haven, a place where the sun never seemed to set.